You sit quietly in your dimly lit study, the soft evening light filtering through the large window, and you look closely at the small, tarnished 10-cent coin resting in the palm of your hand. You are a fully grown adult now, with several decades of complex life experience behind you, but looking at this seemingly insignificant piece of cold metal instantly transports you back to the distant past. You remember with absolute crystal clarity the days when you were exactly 9 years old. It was a pivotal summer, a season that permanently altered the trajectory of your entire existence. Things did not just happen naturally that year. The chain of events began with a deliberate choice. You and your best friend Mike had made a proactive decision to approach his father Julian with a very specific request. You both wanted to explicitly ask him for lessons on how to become wealthy. Julian was an incredibly busy, demanding businessman. He actively managed numerous local restaurants and oversaw multiple sprawling warehouses. He was constantly moving, constantly working, and he simply had absolutely no time to sit down in a quiet room and deliver formal, theoretical classes to two young boys. When you and Mike stood before him and asked for his guidance, Julian looked down at you with a piercing gaze and issued a very firm, unyielding ultimatum. He told you that if you agreed to work for him, he would teach you the lessons you sought. Otherwise, he told you to forget the entire idea. He looked at his watch and stated clearly that the class would either begin or end in exactly 10 seconds. You had to make a rapid choice, and that choice required a significant sacrifice. What did you have to give up in that moment? To secure Julian's approval and begin your education, you had to immediately surrender the Saturday afternoon baseball game that you had been looking forward to all week long. Your friends would be playing in the warm sun, but you would be working. You looked at Mike, nodded your head, and accepted the harsh agreement. That initial trade-off established a fundamental logic that would guide you for the rest of your life. You learned right then and there that valuable financial lessons are never given away for free. You always have to pay a price for the knowledge you deeply desire. You and Mike reported to the small convenience store just as Julian had instructed. When you arrived, you were immediately introduced to the harsh reality of manual labor. You were placed under the strict supervision of Mrs. Grace, the tough, no-nonsense foreman who managed the daily operations of the store. Every single Saturday morning, without fail, you had to dedicate 3 long hours to exhausting, repetitive, physical work. Your assigned tasks were simple, but punishing to your young bodies. You spent your valuable time carrying heavy wooden crates from the back room and meticulously dusting the endless rows of canned goods that lined the shelves. The physical environment itself seemed deliberately designed to frustrate your efforts. The front doors of the small retail store were always kept wide open to welcome the summer air and any potential passing customers. However, the building sat directly adjacent to a dry, unpaved dirt road. Every time a car or a heavy delivery truck drove through the gravel parking lot, it kicked up a massive, swirling cloud of thick brown dust. This dirt would drift lazily through the open front doors and settle silently over everything. You would spend 10 painstaking minutes wiping a row of soup cans until the curved metal shined perfectly, only to helplessly watch a fresh layer of grime coat them moments later as another vehicle drove past the building. It was a deeply demoralizing, endless cycle of cleaning and dirtying. You were fighting a continuous battle against the natural elements that you could never truly win. After 3 grueling hours of lifting, carrying, wiping, and breathing in the stale, dusty air, your tiring shift finally came to an end. Mrs. Grace would walk over, inspect your aisles with a highly critical eye, and then reach deep into the dark pocket of her stained apron. She would slowly pull out your official wages and place them directly into your tired, dirty palm. Your total compensation for the entire morning of backbreaking manual labor was exactly 30 cents. She handed you exactly 3 cold metallic 10-cent coins. At first glance, holding the actual money you had earned entirely by yourself felt like a novel achievement, but that initial excitement rapidly curdled into a deep, incredibly heavy resentment. Why did a mere 30 cents make you feel so incredibly bitter and angry inside? The logical explanation became painfully clear the exact moment you stepped out of the dusty store and looked closely at what your money could purchase in the real world. Even back in the year 1956, when everyday items were relatively cheap, 30 cents was a truly paltry sum, even for a simple 9-year-old child. To put the absolute worthlessness of your meager wages into a completely clear perspective, you only needed to walk over to the local newsstand. A single, brightly colored comic book cost exactly 10 cents. That simple fact meant that working frantically, sweating profusely, and straining your small muscles for 3 solid hours only earned you enough purchasing power to buy exactly 3 comic books. Alternatively, you could buy one single comic book and perhaps a few small odds and ends, like a tiny chocolate candy bar or a single piece of sweet bubblegum. The basic mathematics of your bleak situation were devastating to your young mind. You had voluntarily sacrificed your precious weekend freedom. You had missed out completely on playing fun games with your friends in the bright, sunny park. You had willingly submitted yourself to the strict authority of Mrs. Grace and the endless, choking dust of the open store. And what was your reward for all of this intense discipline and physical effort? 3 small coins that vanished into the cash register in a matter of mere seconds. The thrilling fantasy of learning exactly how to become wealthy had been abruptly shattered into pieces. In its place was the grim, frustrating reality of your current existence. You realized with a sinking heart that you were not a valued apprentice, learning the secrets of the rich. You were merely a 10-cent slave, trading the absolute best hours of your youth for a pathetic handful of metal. You carried the heavy burden of your deep dissatisfaction back to your quiet home. You walked through the front door, feeling completely exhausted and profoundly disillusioned by your harsh introduction to the working world. You found Mark sitting quietly in the comfortable living room, reading a thick book. You sat down across from him, and you poured out all your hidden frustrations. You told him everything about your exhausting morning at the dusty convenience store. You described the endless rows of metallic cans, the suffocating clouds of brown dust blowing in from the unpaved road, and the strict, uncompromising supervision of Mrs. Grace. Finally, you opened your small, dirty hand and showed him the 3 cold 10-cent coins you had actually received for 3 hours of hard physical labor. Mark listened to your story with intense, unwavering focus. As you spoke, a visible wave of righteous anger washed over his familiar features. Mark viewed the entire situation through the clear, structured perspective of a dedicated wage earner and a highly educated academic. In his mind, the world operated on a firm system of rules, fairness, and appropriate compensation for a given effort. To him, seeing his 9-year-old son return home covered in dirt for a mere 30 cents was a blatant violation of those fundamental, deeply held principles. He leaned forward and began to analyze the complex problem using the inherent logic of a loyal employee. He spoke with the calm but incredibly firm authority of a man who strongly believed in protecting the basic rights of all workers. He immediately mentioned the strict child labor laws that existed to actively prevent the unfair exploitation of innocent minors. He argued passionately that your physical labor, your valuable time, and your youthful energy possessed an inherent, undeniable value that was being severely disrespected by the wealthy businessmen. He stated clearly that absolutely nobody should ever be forced to work for a pathetic 10 cents an hour. He insisted that your honest physical efforts deserved a minimum wage of at least 25 cents an hour. Mark then offered you his definitive, protective advice on how to correctly handle the difficult situation. He told you that you needed to be exceptionally brave and directly confront your employer. He advised you to march directly into Julian and his main corporate office, look the man straight in the eye, and confidently demand your rightful, legal compensation. He made it perfectly clear that if Julian refused to pay you the fair rate of 25 cents an hour, you must quit the terrible job immediately and walk away with your personal dignity completely intact. You listened closely to every single word he said. You do not judge him, and you do not declare that his perspective is right or wrong. Every single father has a completely different way of raising their children, and they teach you in their own unique way based on their own personal experiences. Mark was teaching you how to fiercely protect your worth within the established societal system. His words felt incredibly powerful to your young, developing mind. They were so logical and so perfectly reasonable that they completely erased any lingering doubts you previously had. You suddenly felt as though you were actively representing pure, unadulterated justice. You were no longer just a tired little boy. You were a righteous worker preparing to demand your fair payment. You spent the rest of the long week carefully preparing a passionate, articulate speech in your head, absolutely determined to bravely denounce the unfair exploitation perpetrated by your powerful employer. The following Saturday morning, exactly at 8 o'clock, you bypassed the dusty convenience store entirely and walked straight to Julian's main corporate office. You were prepared for a serious confrontation. When you arrived, you told his busy assistant that you needed to speak with him immediately. The assistant looked up briefly and told you to sit down and wait outside his private door. You sat down on a hard, unforgiving wooden bench. Mike sat down on a chair right next to you. You looked around the waiting room and noticed 3 other people sitting quietly on chairs. You recognized them as adults who worked for Julian in various capacities, including the manager of his warehouse and the manager of one of his busy restaurants. You waited for 10 minutes, but the door remained closed. You waited for 20 minutes, and still Julian did not come out. You waited for 30 minutes, and a deep sense of frustration began to grow inside your chest. You waited for a full 45 minutes in total silence. That long, agonizing wait was not an accident. It was a deliberate demonstration of absolute power. Julian made you wait to illustrate a profound reality of the commercial world: the absolute power of the person who pays versus the complete dependence of the person who gets paid. In the eyes of the powerful boss, the time of an ordinary employee is essentially worthless and cheap. You were forced to sit there, realizing that your schedule did not matter at all compared to the schedule of the man who held the purse strings. Finally, after 45 agonizing minutes had dragged by, Julian opened his heavy oak door and told you to come inside his office. You stood up immediately, your small fists clenched tightly in your pockets, and you marched into the room. You looked directly at Julian, and you poured out all the resentment that had been building up inside you for weeks. You told him that he was completely unfair and that he did not keep his word. You shouted that he never taught you anything about making money as he had promised, and you accused him of violating child labor laws by paying you such a paltry sum. You unleashed every single angry thought that Mark had put into your head, firmly believing that you were the ultimate representative of pure justice, demanding what was legally and morally right. Julian did not look angry or surprised by your passionate outburst. Instead, he simply smiled, a calm, knowing smile. He leaned back in his large leather chair and began to explain his logic with absolute patience. He told you that if a person tries to teach by theory alone, just like teachers do in a traditional classroom, the student will simply forget the lesson. Life, however, teaches its most important lessons by pushing and shoving you around. Julian calmly revealed that he deliberately chose to pay you a mere 10 cents an hour for a very specific reason. He needed to force you to taste the true bitter flavor of being a low-level employee. He needed you to feel deeply indignant and angry. He explained the core formula of true passion for learning, telling you that true passion is always a powerful combination of love and anger. He told you that if you had happily accepted the 10 cents without a single complaint, you would have been content in your misery, and he would never have been able to teach you the real secrets of wealth. Then, Julian initiated a clever game of temptation to test your developing character and your underlying greed. He decided to throw out enticing monetary bait to see how your mind would react. He looked at you and calmly stated that he was willing to increase your pay to 25 cents an hour. Your young mind immediately considered the offer. Before you could even open your mouth to accept, Julian raised the stakes and offered you $1 full an hour. Your eyes widened in absolute shock, because $1 an hour was an incredible, almost unbelievable amount of money in the year 1956. You imagined all the things you could buy, but Julian was not finished yet. He leaned forward across his polished desk and casually offered you $5 an hour, which was a completely crazy, staggering sum of money that almost no ordinary adult worker could ever hope to earn at that specific time in history. Inside your head, your thoughts were screaming at you to accept the offer immediately. The temptation was enormous, pulling at every fiber of your young body. Yet, despite the intense desire for the cash, you and Mike remained completely silent. You looked at Julian, and you did not speak a single word. That strategic silence marked a crucial, unforgettable turning point in your mental development. To completely decode this pivotal moment, one must understand the deeper psychological mechanics of the situation. Julian understood that virtually every single human being trapped within the traditional workforce has an absolute, definite price. More importantly, that price is relentlessly fueled by two powerful, primal emotions: fear and greed. The constant, nagging fear of not having enough money to pay the monthly bills forces ordinary people to wake up every single morning and rush off to a job they genuinely despise. Then, the moment they finally receive their paycheck, a blinding sense of greed and desire takes over their thoughts, making them want to buy endless material possessions. That unbridled greed forces them to spend every single cent of their hard-earned wages immediately. It is the classic, inescapable cycle known universally as the rat race. People run in a continuous, frantic circle of earning and spending, trapped entirely by their own emotional responses to currency, never realizing that more money alone will never solve a structural lack of financial education. To break that powerful addiction to a weekly paycheck and to permanently snap the invisible chains of the rat race, Julian delivered his final, startling conclusion. He looked you straight in the eyes and issued a harsh command to alter your trajectory forever. He told you that you must return to the convenience store and continue your grueling labor, but with one massive, terrifying condition. This time, you would receive absolutely no pay whatsoever. You had to work for 0 cents. This radical step was designed to completely sever your emotional dependence on the physical reward of labor and open your eyes to true freedom. It was the ultimate test of your willingness to learn and grow beyond ordinary limits. The silence in the room stretched out as you absorbed the gravity of his words. You realized that true wealth was never about the coins in your pocket, but the unyielding discipline inside your mind. You nodded, slowly. You would return to the dusty store. You would work without receiving a single coin. Working without the promise of a paycheck permanently altered your perception of the world around you. When you were no longer hyper-focused on anticipating the reward of 30 cents at the very end of your long shift, your eyes slowly opened to the broader, more complex environment around the convenience store. 2 full weeks of unpaid labor passed. During this time, your mental bandwidth expanded, and you actually started to look around the dusty store with fresh, observant eyes. You started to carefully watch exactly what Mrs. Grace accomplished during her daily routine. One afternoon, you noticed Mrs. Grace walk over to a wooden rack and pick up a large stack of old, unsold comic books. You watched her with intense curiosity as she deliberately took a pair of scissors and tore the top half of the brightly colored cover off the first comic book. You watched her carelessly throw the rest of the thick, perfectly readable comic book directly into a large brown cardboard box sitting on the floor. You watched her tear the cover off the second comic book and toss the remaining pages into the trash box. You stopped wiping the cans, walked straight over to Mrs. Grace, and you politely asked her why she was destroying and discarding the comic books. She casually told you that those specific comic books did not sell during the month. She explained the logic of the business. She simply needed to give the torn top half of the cover back to the delivery person to prove the books were unsold. By doing this, she gets her consignment money back as a financial credit. She explicitly told you that the rest of the comic book pages were officially considered worthless garbage by the main distributor. You quickly formulated a plan. You waited patiently in the store until the comic book delivery man finally arrived. His name was Tom. You walked right up to Tom, feeling a surge of nervous excitement. You asked Tom exactly what he does with the thick comic books sitting discarded in the large brown box. Tom laughed and bluntly told you that he simply throws them away in the trash. You took a deep breath and asked Tom if you could possibly have the comic books in the brown box, instead of him throwing them away. Tom stopped laughing and looked closely at you. He thought for a moment, and then he told you that you could indeed have the comic books, but he insisted on one major, strict condition. He said you could take them, as long as you promised that you would never resell them. You eagerly promised Tom that you would never sell the books. Satisfied, Tom generously gave you the entire brown box filled with incredible stories. You and Mike grabbed the heavy brown box together, and you carefully carried it out of the store. You carried the heavy box all the way down the street to the house where Mike lived. You took the heavy box down the dark wooden stairs and directly into the cool, unfinished basement. You and Mike sat in the basement and decided to operate a new business model. The brilliant loophole in your agreement with Tom was incredibly simple. You could not sell the comic books, but you could absolutely rent them. You spent the next few busy days tirelessly gathering hundreds of comic books and preparing the basement for business. You swept the dirty concrete floor and wiped the dust off several old tables you found in the corner. You stacked the comic books neatly and attractively on the tables. As you looked at your setup, you quickly realized that you needed someone trustworthy to manage the library while you were not there. You went to speak with Lily. Lily was the intelligent younger sister of Mike, and she loved reading books. You asked Lily if she wanted a job as a librarian. You told Lily that you would pay her exactly $1 every single week. You told Lily her specific job was to sit in the basement, collect the entrance money from the neighborhood children, and make sure absolutely nobody steals the comic books when they leave. Lily happily agreed to take the job. You enthusiastically told all the children about the library. Each child in the neighborhood paid 10 cents to enter and read for 2 full hours. The children benefited greatly, because for 10 cents they could read 5 or 6 books instead of buying just one. The results were astounding. You and Mike earned an average of $9.50 a week. The money was generated automatically even when you were not around. You had successfully built an automatic money printing machine, finally making money work for you. You sit quietly in your very own comfortable leather chair, and you look very closely at the small, tarnished 10-cent coin resting safely in the palm of your right hand. The vivid memories of that long, unforgettable summer slowly begin to fade into the background, leaving behind a profound and lasting clarity. You realize right now that a steady salary is often the perfect, invisible sedative. It is a highly comforting drug designed to artificially soothe your daily anxieties and make you completely forget all of your true, grandest dreams. People become so heavily addicted to the predictable comfort of that regular paycheck that they willingly trade their most valuable hours and their deepest passions for a false sense of security. They blindly run endlessly in the exhausting rat race, entirely blinded by the constant fear of losing their meager wages. The thriving comic book library you built in that dusty basement so many years ago remains the absolute clearest living proof of a totally different path. That simple library stands as a brilliant monument to the ultimate lesson Julian taught you. It proves beyond any doubt that the very moment you finally stop working desperately for money, your mind undergoes a radical transformation. Your vision clears, and you suddenly begin to see the incredible, money-making opportunities that are quietly lying right inside the trash cans of other people. You learn to recognize the hidden value that the rest of the world carelessly throws away. You slip the 10-cent coin deep into your pocket, forever grateful for the contrasting wisdom of the two fathers. You carry their essential lessons forward into the bright future, knowing absolutely that true wealth is never found by wiping dusty cans, but by building powerful, automated systems that work tirelessly for you.